Today's topic is the basics of cryptography, and we will know how hashing and encryption work. The complete mastery of modern cryptography requires a lot of effort and competence in different areas of mathematics and computing. Fortunately, we can at least grasp the basics of public-private key cryptography and cryptographic hashing. Cryptography, word by word, means hidden writing and studies the techniques of secure communication. It is about protecting the privacy of individuals and ensuring the information exchange that is inaccessible for any other third parties. The well-known historical example that demonstrates the benefits of cryptography comes from ancient times. The famous Roman general Julius Caesar used a special technique to make his military messages unreadable for the enemies. Caesar communicated with his generals in writing, delivering the messages to the particular locations. An obvious problem was that someone could capture his couriers, so he ciphered the messages and made them useless by hiding their real content. Unfortunately, there are several flaws with Caesar's communication model, because he used simple +3 technique. The communication participants knew in advance that each letter in his message in reality meant the other letter, the third one after it, in the Latin alphabet. Let us take the 5 letters of English alphabet for demonstration. B, C, D, E, F. If we use Caesar's +3 technique, we will find that in the cipher text B equals E and C equals F. If we apply this technique to the whole English alphabet, the name Julius will be expressed as MXOLXV in the cipher text. There were 2 major problems with the Cesarean cipher. It was very simple and the enemy could try to decipher it and understand how +3 technique worked. Another issue was that this particular mechanism could be used for encrypting as well as decrypting the text. The system seemed very convenient, as Caesar's generals were able to apply the +3 technique to decrypt and read Caesar's messages, as well as encrypt their own and send them to him. But the word spreads, and it was possible for the enemies to spy on the generals, and in that way gain knowledge of the encryption mechanism. That knowledge would have allowed the enemies to read the messages by capturing the couriers. They could also bribe the couriers and send Caesar the wrong information using the same +3 technique. The frequency analysis will demonstrate the simplicity of the +3 encryption mechanism. Each human language repeats the characters in different sequences. For example, the most popular letter in English is E. Therefore, it is possible to crack the text that is ciphered with the +3 technique by simply identifying the most repeated characters in it. In the +3 model, E would mean H. If the most common character is H in the encrypted text, we can already assume that it is a +3 technique if we are dealing with the English alphabet. We also have to take into account that the modern computing is very advanced and scientists can crack very complicated encryption models. So encryption seems quite useless, but it is not. Scientists managed to create encryption techniques that ensure secure communication. In the late 20th century, the scientists figured out that the multiplication of the 2 large prime numbers resulted in the number that was not useful for identifying the numbers that were multiplied. There is no easy mathematical method to identify the original multiplied large prime numbers by just knowing the result. It's a matter of trial and error and takes a lot of time even with the aid of supercomputers. That led to the development of different encryption models, one of which is cryptographic hashing. But let us draw a clear line between cryptographic hashing and encryption of the information exchange. With encryption, we can transform plain text into an unreadable cipher text, which can become an encrypted message. The decryption of the message is possible with a special key, which simply is a knowledge of the encryption technique that was applied to the text. As we have already demonstrated, Cesarean cipher used the same key for encryption as well as decryption, which was a simple +3 technique. Nowadays it is possible to encrypt any kind of data, including music and video files, and we no longer use the same keys for encryption and decryption. Even though cryptographic hashing is a particular encryption method, it is useless for secure communication. Hashing just enables us to enter particular data and receive its hash, the hash value. The amount of entered data can vary, but its hash value is limited to a particular number of symbols. Hashing can only be used for protecting the data that we would like to hide from others. The published hash value does not lead to the hashed data, but it will enable us to check whether the published hash represents the particular data. It is done by revealing the data as well as its hash value. There are different hashing algorithms. They take multiple mathematical steps to encrypt any kind of data in such a way that it would be impossible to know what was the data that was hashed. For example, if we use secure hash algorithm 256, the hash for the word hello will be the number that is expressed in 64 hexadecimal characters. For our purposes, hexadecimal is a numbering system that is used for expressing significantly large numbers. So if we assume only the knowledge of the above-mentioned hash value, as well as of the mathematical steps the algorithm takes for hashing the particular data, it will be very difficult to reverse the word hello from its hash, even with the application of modern computing. But the absence of mathematical formulas does not prevent the clever hackers to reverse the hash if the hashed data is very simple. They can use different computer programs and try common names, words, and other symbols. The computing power and special software accelerate the process by trying various words and symbols at a rapid pace. So if we hash a large number that includes more than 100 characters, it is practically impossible to identify the number by just knowing its hash. As it was already said, the number of symbols in the hashed value is always the same. For example, if we use the secure hash algorithm 256, the word hello and the 1000 word story will provide completely different hashes, but they both will be expressed in 64 hexadecimal characters. Bitcoin's blockchain employs hashing quite extensively. All blocks and transactions are hashed, but the data that is hashed is accessible as well as all hashes. So what is the major purpose of using hashes in blockchain? As every transaction is hashed, we can identify them with their hashes, but what really matters is that they are connected to each other with the hash of all transactions in the block and the hash of the block itself. As it was already explained, different input data has its own unique output hash value. Therefore, the hacker who wants to make changes in blockchain has to deal with the mathematically connected hashes and change them. It can't be done without the changing of the hashed data itself. Therefore, it will take a lot of time and resources. When parties exchange the messages and use the same key for encryption as well as decryption, they rely on symmetric encryption. Modern cryptography offers the techniques which make it impossible to hack the encryption model, but the problem is that both sender and receiver need to know what the encryption key is. An obvious danger is that the key can be compromised when parties inform each other about it. So if the third party manages to capture the encryption key, all communication that was encrypted with that key will be accessible for that third party. The scientists solved the single key problem by creating the public-private key encryption that is asymmetric in its nature. Instead of one, it uses two keys, public and private. Each party selects the private key, which may include randomly selected numbers or symbols, and ensures that it is secret for everyone else. Then each party generates the public key from the private key. The cryptographic algorithms that manage the public key generation process are arranged so that it is impossible to guess the private key from its public key. So the communication between two parties requires only the exchange of public keys. Anyone who wants to send a ciphered message to you just needs to know your public key. The message will be encrypted with your public key, and you will decrypt it with your private key. If parties want to authenticate themselves as senders of particular messages, they can attach their digital signatures to their messages. In other words, sign the messages with their private keys. So the receiver will receive the message that is encrypted with the receiver's public key, which the receiver can decrypt. Then, to authenticate the party who sent the message, the receiver will unlock the signature with the public key of the sender. In that way, both message and signature will be accessible to the receiver. Let us again imagine Caesar and his generals. In 54 BC, they met the time traveler cryptographer from the 21st century who was willing to share the achievements of modern cryptography. Caesar was very keen to master the new art and managed to gain knowledge of asymmetric encryption. In 50 BC, Caesar and his generals all had public and private keys. When sending the message, Caesar always encrypted it with the general's public key, and the general decrypted it with his private key. On the other hand, Caesar received messages that were encrypted with his public key. If Caesar needed to confirm that he was the author of the message, he could attach his digital signature, and general could unlock it with Caesar's public key. Indeed, generals could also do the same. Unfortunately, the time travel accident remained a secret, and technique was lost because Caesar was the only one who knew the inner workings of it. To return to the 21st century, Public-private key encryption is currently widely integrated within web communication systems and is one of the major mechanisms that help cryptocurrency transactions on the blockchain. As usual, transaction is not encrypted itself, but crypto is sent to the receiver on the address that is derived from the public key, which in turn is generated from the private key of the receiver. The receiver can then unlock the transaction with the private key and send cryptocurrency to another user. Senders sign the transactions with their private keys, and in that way they prove that they are the ones who sent the crypto. So your blockchain address that is generated from a public key enables the users to send you cryptocurrency, while the private key is the sole instrument for unlocking the transaction and controlling the crypto that was sent to you. The identification of the sender is possible with the digital signature that the sender accomplishes with the private key.